Hey guys, what's going on? I wanted to share with you a case study. This is actually the first storage facility that we bought back in 2011. It's out in Syracuse, New York. When we bought it, it was called Automakers, and I have no idea what that name has to do with self-storage, but I know I wanted something with a little more that was a little more obviously tied to the storage industry. So we called it Store More, Pay Less. Um, and essentially, the property was 11 and a half acres. Uh, 5.5 or so of that was wetland, so it was unusable. We had 6 usable acres, which you can more or less see here in the red outline. When we bought it, there was a fence here. You can kind of see how that delineation would be, with 3 buildings totaling 10,000 square feet, and then 74 outdoor parking spots here in a very inefficiently parked pattern you can kind of see there. And then all this space over here and back here was just wasted. The property was 55% full when we bought it, and that's what we were told, and what we were able to verify was pretty darn close to that. Until after closing, we did realize that the brother of the owner had moved out the day before we closed on the property, and the owner had several units that weren't disclosed to us. So we were right around 50%. We expect that someone who's this neglectful of a property is probably going to neglect to tell us the whole truth, and so we make sure that as we're negotiating and analyzing a deal, we're building in those allowances. The owner in this situation was it was kind of a very sad situation, actually. She was getting up there in age and had some early signs of dementia. She also had a lot on her plate. She had a family member out of state who was dealing with some health issues, and the owner would simply pack up and leave for anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, at a time, without putting anything in place. And so essentially she was just neglecting the property. When we bought it, we did so based on these numbers, and again, we did take them with a grain of salt, but the property was capable of generating $131,000 in revenue, and yet she was only collecting just under $51,000. So, though it was 50% full, that's physically speaking, and from a financial standpoint, she was collecting even less than that. You'll see down here in the expenses, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here other than to tell you these are clearly way out of whack, which isn't surprising. If you neglect a property, you're probably going to neglect your record keeping as well. But these came off a tax return, so I have no idea how she didn't end up in audit with them. But certainly we're going to need to spend some money on advertising if we expect to run a profitable facility. We're also going to need to do repairs and maintenance. Going down here, you'll see some of these are out of whack in the other direction. Office supplies of 16 grand is that's a whole lot of paper and staples. So I'm not sure what was going on there. Same with a telephone. If you're spending 4 grand a year on a telephone, you're clearly doing something wrong. But when all that was said and done, she's got expenses 80% of what she's collecting, which leaves only with $10,000 or so. Again, take these numbers with a grain of salt. $10,000 or so in profit before you pay debt service. So if you factor in the financing, which we'll talk about in a minute, that I did for this facility, we would actually be losing about $25,000 a year, or a little over $2,000 every month. But we were very confident that we could run this place a little more efficiently than it was being run at the time. And so we put together these projections for year one. We thought we could get the collected rent up considerably, up to $80,000, which is, that's a hefty increase, and though it seems like a big jump, it's still relatively conservative when you look at how many people we had to get to move in per month over the stretch of the course of the year. We also plugged in, using our knowledge and a little bit of due diligence and research, very realistic expense numbers, which were just slightly higher than hers, but allocated in a much more realistic way. And even in doing that, we're going to have a net operating income, which is income minus expenses, of $36,000. Remember, we've got to back out our debt service from there, which is about $35,000. So this property is still only projected to more or less break even after year one. That's a full year's worth of work for not a whole lot of money, which you might start to wonder, well, why would you do it, Mike? And that's kind of where the genius of all this comes in, is you've got to have a little bit of a long-term mindset. We're not talking 5, 10, 15, or 20 years away retirement style planning. We're talking about anywhere from 12 to 48 months to turn a facility around, depending on the exact location. But I'll call your attention to this third column, and what you'll see here is these are the actual numbers we did in 2012. So we smoked our projections for revenue, which was awesome. The market was just hungry for a good self-storage facility with owners that were dedicated and managers that were dedicated to serving the needs of the customers. That's really all it is. We answered the phone, we were attentive, we did the simple things that any business should do to impress their clients. As far as our expenses go, you'll see that they were slightly higher than we projected, but still our net operating income, or before debt profits, was a hefty $11,000 more than we projected. So all that being said, we were very happy with how the first year went. Apologize that my ugly face is in the way there, but I'll talk you through this. The purchase price was $330,000. We had closing costs of roughly 20 grand, which put our total acquisition price at $350,000, which was a whole lot more money than I had at the time. I didn't have much to my name, but I had a bunch of rental properties. And so what I did is I pulled $40,000 in equity from those properties. And I also borrowed $60,000 from a private lender at a very healthy interest rate. I paid them 10%, interest-only payments. And then we also borrowed $250,000 from a bank via a typical SBA 7A loan, which is the Small Business Administration loan. And then I'll show you here, these are the full performance of the property. We've already looked at the first three columns in a previous slide. This third 2013 column, again, these were what we projected. We thought we'd get up to 88% occupancy, which would have brought in 111 grand. Our expenses were projected, again, we didn't adjust these based on year one when I put the spreadsheet together. Probably should have, that would have been the wise thing to do, but even so, you'll see, I think it worked out in our favor. Our net operating income by the end of the second full year was up from 10 grand to $70,000. And again, these were projections. The actual for 2013 was $140,000 in revenue, $51,000 in expenses, which gave us 90 grand, or a full 30% more than we had projected. Now, part of that is you can see a big jump in our gross expected revenue right here. Oh, my apologies. Let me back up. It was 131 if we were full as a projection, but we actually added some storage space. We added buildings, 2 buildings to be exact. So our potential rent, or our potential income, jumped by 50 grand up to 181. And so then we started filling that space as well. And that's why with our income here of 141, we actually eclipsed what would have even been possible in our initial projections. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, we've listed out expenses here. Those are run pretty standard relative to what percentage they make up of the revenue, income to expense ratio. 2014, again, we have projections here. This should say the 181. I apologize for the typo there. And then 2014 actual, we're up to 180 in revenue. 2015, you can see we steadily increased to 2001. And then since then, 2016, 17, and thus far into 18, we've continued to raise these numbers to the point where our net operating income is around $160,000 right now, which means all our money coming in is roughly around 220, 225. We back out 65 to 70 for our expenses, and that leaves us with the 160 or so, give or take, in before debt profit. Now, that's important to know because the income is how we value a property. And these are just some pictures here of our construction that we had done during the expansion. We ended up adding a total of 20,000 square feet to this property, and that brought us to 30,000 rentable square feet. We've also got approvals for another 15,600 square feet, so we can increase the current size by another 50%. Because we've got other projects that we're looking to dive into, this is a property we're currently selling. We're on schedule to close next month, mid to late next month. And in doing so, we're going to sell it for roughly 11 times the net operating income, which for those of you who know about cap rates, and I'm happy to teach you, represents a cap rate of about 9%, which is pretty standard. It'll, of course, be market specific, but for around here, getting a 9 cap sales price is pretty good. So we're going to sell it for $1.8 million. When you factor in our purchase price, all the expansion, and we even pulled out some equity from this property to pay off a mortgage on our last house. We owe about $800,000 on this property today. We're selling it for 1.8, so we'll clear about $1 million. It's on average made us $70,000 or so a year since we've owned it. Now, clearly, in the first year or two, you saw it made us barely not anything. In more recent years, it's made us much more than $70,000 per year. So on average, we ended up at 70. So we paid off $150,000 on our personal house. We've collected roughly 70 grand a year over the 6 or 7 years, I guess, that we've owned it. And we'll put $1 million before taxes in our pocket next month. So this facility has been incredible for us, and the new owners will do very well. Also, one of my strategies is certainly to leave some meat on the bone. That way I have an easily saleable product at the end, and that's what we're doing here. So this is what it looks like kind of today. On the left-hand side, you'll see here, this is just a blown-up version of what you saw before and what it looked like when we bought it. We've since added, these were the 3 buildings that were there. We've since added this one and this one, as well as this fake one that I drew in with my little paint stick here, because Google doesn't keep up with us. We expand faster than Google takes overhead pictures. This building that looks a little crooked, because it is crooked, it's a pole barn that's set at just a slight angle to allow for a more narrow driveway space between these buildings. That building's actually there as well. So we've got the 7 buildings down this way, and these gray buildings represent our approved buildings. These are the 15,600 square feet that we're going to be able to add. You can also probably see here a pretty well delineated line, and that's the fence. When we bought this property, the fence came right down like so, and we just extended it back a little and then enclosed this portion to be able to build these buildings without cannibalizing the revenue. We get about $3,500 a month from outdoor storage, so we didn't want to just give that up as we put up buildings. So we just fenced it in and resurfaced this parking lot with road millings. And so, as I said, this property is the one that got us started in our storage rebellion, and it was, by all measurements, a home run. I was very cautious afterwards not to use it as my bar for performance. I didn't expect that everyone would go like this. I didn't expect that any would go this well again. I'm happy to say that the next 2, which I'll share in some subsequent videos, went extremely well. Again, not quite as well as this one, but as far as I'm concerned, still having some life-altering profits, and it really has been incredible. So hopefully you guys found that to be enjoyable. I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions for you, talk storage with you at any time. And you can, I'm sure, find several different ways on this website to connect with us. So don't be afraid to reach out. I'd more than happily speak with you and see if I can't answer any questions for you. Till then,